Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tearing apart a deeply ingrained and, honestly, pretty frustrating workplace practice, setting performance targets. We're going to look at a fascinating academic study by Yasmin Bol and Jeremy Lill, published in the Accounting Review, that asks a really simple but explosive question. Why do standard workplace performance targets so often backfire?
Okay, let's dive into this, because I'm sure many of you have experienced this exact, deeply frustrating scenario. You work your heart out, you finally beat your annual quota, and your reward? You're handed an impossibly hard target for the very next year. It feels like you're being punished for your own success, right? Well, it turns out management theory has a whole lot to say about what actually happens when companies do this.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll cover the target setting trap, the ratchet effect, the contract dilemma, implicit agreements, information and trust, and finally look at some real-world evidence.
Starting off with Section 1, the target setting trap.
That everyday frustration of crushing a goal only to be handed a heavier burden actually has a very specific formal name in management research: target ratcheting. It's defined as the practice where a principal uses an agent's past performance to determine and annually revise future targets upward. Now, to keep things accessible as we go through this research, whenever you hear principal in these academic terms, just think the boss. And when you hear agent, think the employee. So target ratcheting is quite simply your boss using your amazing performance this year as the new baseline for next year's goals.
Moving on to Section 2, the ratchet effect.
When bosses constantly ratchet up targets based on past performance, it inevitably triggers a highly strategic and, frankly, highly detrimental response from the employees. And that brings us to the ratchet effect. This is the strategic response where an employee intentionally restricts their current output to avoid facing harder, unattainable targets in the future. I mean, think about the sheer logic of it. If working at 100% capacity today guarantees you'll miss your bonus tomorrow because your target shoots up, the logical move is to work at 80% and save some for later. Employees literally slow down to maximize their long-term payouts.
And this is a massive problem. Grounded in research published by the American Accounting Association, analytical models and experimental evidence consistently show that this strategic response severely and negatively impacts overall firm value. The company completely loses out on massive potential productivity because their best people are actively hiding what they can truly achieve out of fear of future punishment.
Which brings us to Section 3, the contract dilemma. So how do we actually fix this? We have a fundamental tension here. Employers are trying to maximize output, while employees are just trying to protect their bonuses. And this brilliantly illustrates the two extreme solutions that historically fail. On one side, we have no commitment contracts. These are short-term, period-by-period agreements where the boss can change the target whenever they want. As we just learned, this rigidly encourages employees to restrict their output. On the flip side, we have full commitment contracts. The boss promises, long-term, never to raise the target based on performance. The flaw here: it completely ignores new environmental data. If a massive technological shift permanently makes the job twice as easy, the target stays the same, and the company suffers from huge underproduction, so both extremes are fundamentally flawed.
Let's dive into Section 4, implicit agreements.
But there is a middle ground, and it's the turning point of our explainer. The researchers found that the best organizations actually use a nuanced, unwritten solution. I absolutely love this quote directly from the paper. It says, "The principal allows the agent to receive economic rents, while the agent accepts target revisions by not restricting output." What does this mean in plain English? Basically, it's an unwritten handshake. The boss agrees not to punish hard work. If an employee crushes it because of superior effort or just a lucky temporary gain, the boss lets them keep the big bonus and doesn't jack up the target next year. In return, the employee agrees not to artificially restrict their output, trusting that if targets are revised upward, it's only because the fundamental operating capacity of the business actually changed.
But here is the billion-dollar question. How do you maintain this utopian handshake when both sides have massive incentives to lie? Think about the severe information asymmetry at play here. When an employee beats their target, they're always going to claim their success is due to their own incredible hard work or a temporary lucky streak, rather than admitting the job has permanently gotten easier and targets should be raised.
This leads us to Section 5, information and trust.
So the crucial point is, how does a boss actually evaluate the truthfulness of an employee's claims so this handshake can survive? The researchers Bol and Lill identified 3 specific conditions, what we'll call the 3 pillars, that actually allow these implicit agreements to survive in the chaotic real world. They are peer information, environmental volatility, and mutual trust. Let's look at how each of these clears up that information asymmetry.
Let's look at Pillar 1, peer information. If you are an employee who's a top performer compared to your direct peers operating in the exact same market, the boss gets a massive clue. High performance relative to your peers strongly signals that your success was due to superior effort, not just an easy structural target that everyone benefited from. Because of this, the boss can confidently let you have your win without feeling the need to aggressively ratchet up your future targets. Moving to Pillar 2, environmental volatility. If the boss knows that the market you operate in is highly unstable, maybe regulations are constantly shifting or the economy is bouncing around, it makes your claims much more credible. If you have a sudden, massive spike in performance, the boss is more likely to accept that it was just a temporary, transitory gain driven by the crazy environment, rather than a permanent structural shift that requires a higher baseline target moving forward.
And finally, Pillar 3, trust. This one is vital. Even with high information asymmetry, where the boss just can't be 100% sure why you succeeded, deep mutual trust allows the agreement to survive. The researchers found that long tenure and a shared history of working under the same compensation system build the mutual trust necessary to uphold the handshake. You trust the boss won't punish you for a good year, and they trust you aren't sandbagging your metrics.
And that brings us to our final section, real-world evidence. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer scale of the data set. Theory is great, but the researchers actually went out and proved this theory using an incredible data set spanning the years 2001 through 2003. They analyzed 315 independent local banks, all part of a massive European cooperative bank network. These banks all use the exact same incentive framework, but each local board independently set targets for their general directors. This provided a perfect real-world laboratory to observe target ratcheting in action.
You can see how meticulously performance was tracked in this study. They looked really closely at the profitability ratio, which was defined as service-based revenues to total costs. The mean profitability ratio across the sample was 1.25. Across the board, 65% of the general directors met their minimum performance standard, and exactly 48% met their full target performance standard. This shows us that these targets were highly competitive and definitely meaningful.
And here is the ultimate payoff, the empirical proof. The researchers found exactly what they theorized. When looking at the target revisions year over year, target ratcheting was successfully attenuated, meaning bosses held back on unfairly raising targets, when directors had top peer performance, operated in high environmental volatility, or had established high mutual trust. When these three pillars are present, the dreaded ratchet effect is severely reduced, proving that these unwritten implicit agreements truly do work to prevent output restriction.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer. I want to leave you with a crucial question to take back to your own desk. Is your organization using targets to inspire true potential, or is your rigid target setting process just driving your best people to hide what they are truly capable of? If your system simply punishes success, you might be losing out on incredible output. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I hope this helps you completely rethink the way performance is managed around you.